Chapter 1, Angels in Armani. When someone walks into Jimmy's in a pair of shoes that cost more than I make in a week and in a suit that costs more than my distressed classic Ford, I know he is either in the wrong place and in trouble or the right place and is trouble. Let me just say, Lord, he looked like the kind of man your mother would have warned you about if she'd had a much better imagination, a lifetime subscription to Cosmopolitan, and had written Sex and the City /fiction. I sighed as a string of fantasies about him began braiding the threads of my dull daydream life into knots. I imagined him reaching his strong, forceful hand over his tight, firm buttocks, pulling out a big, thick, hard wallet before leaving a generous, well-deserved tip. Oh, baby, you know that one gets all my juices flowing. I gave him my patented 150-watt smile as he sidled up to the bar. He gave the lipstick red seat of the stool an apprehensive look, but instead of bolting for the door, he drew out a bona fide monogrammed handkerchief and decorously wiped the stool off before he sat down. I could not make out the actual letters. However, it definitely looked like it was made of real linen or possibly silk. Now he eyed the bar warily, but before he could bolt for the door, I reached under the bar and pulled out the most cleanish bar rag available. I gave the bar a thorough wiping down, mostly turning the greasy streaks into greasy swirls. I made a good show of it, worth far more than the price of admittance. As his gaze settled on me, I turned up my smile by another 10 watts. If I weren't careful, I would either sprain my facial muscles or go too far and end up with a serial killer grimace. You know, like Heath Ledger in that movie where he wears more makeup than my whore of a sister, Vanity. Okay, so she isn't really a whore. She's just a raging coquette and, not to mention, a witch. I'm not joking about the last part. She really is a witch. She even writes books about it. Okay, sorry about that. I really don't intend to project my sibling rivalry issues all over the story. It isn't her fault that my mother named her Vanity Pride and named me Penny Pride. Way to go, Mom. Good job setting the bar low for me. Vanity's actually pretty good to me, and I'm glad, because if this guy doesn't start dropping some serious greenbacks, she will probably be paying my rent this month. I think it's only fair if she ponies up some cash here and there. Not only did she get the better name, but also the boob fairy was much more generous with her. And let's not forget, she does have that witch thing going for her. I don't want it to look like I'm spiteful towards her, because I'm not. I really, really am not. I'm not spiteful towards my sister. I'm not spiteful towards my sister. I'm really not spiteful towards my perfect sister, Vanity. That's my mantra. If I keep saying it, then it must be true, right? Damn, I must have lost myself in my mantra a little too long, and I hope to hell I kept it to myself. When I snapped back to it, my Armani-clad angel was standing there with its head canted slightly to the left, like that dog on the old RCA pictures. I wiped down the bar once more, giving him my biggest smile. Oh my God. I could see Heath Ledger reflected in his eyes, so I toned it down, asking him how he was doing tonight. I saw a look of silent contemplation drift across his face, and I knew he was thinking about making a break for the door. I quickly said, "Hey, you're in time for happy hour. You can still beat the rush." Normal smile, normal smile. He sat down, smiling in return. He looked at me with a raised eyebrow and said, "Can you make me a death in the afternoon?" I exclaimed, "Absolutely. Just try the meatloaf." Seriously, I can make the drink, but I will have to substitute ginger ale for the champagne and vodka with green dish soap for the absinthe. He smirked cynically, saying, "You have dish detergent under there?" I took a step back, looking around. I have some greenish Mr. Clean? He seemed to give the idea some thought. How about a Moscow mule, he said, waiting to see how this would go over. I nodded, saying, so go with the vodka and ginger ale, and I will swap out the Mr. Clean for lime juice. How does that sound? So much for naming a Mr. Clean cocktail after you. I gave him a knowing grin, saying, you look like a top shelf kind of guy. This is always a risky move, gratuity-wise. If you make a patron feel special, then you can expect a nice tip. However, if the patron thinks that they overpaid for a drink, then that extra cash could very well come out of your tip, and no member of the service industry ever wants that. In my head, I recited the prayer for better tips. Jesus loves Martha and Mary and Lazarus. Saint Martha, I resort to thy aid and protection, not to mention voluntary gratuities. So that you know, the part about voluntary gratuities is not the actual prayer. It's my very own personal edition. I must have given him the Joker grimace again, because the expression on his face looked like he had just sucked a lemon. Without any further hesitation, I turned and mixed a Moscow mule for him with some extra kick. Turning back with his drink in hand, I gave him a smile followed by a quick wink, saying, let me know how this is, hun. The smile had returned to his face slowly and was now firmly in place. He picked up the glass and studied it, turning it slowly. He brought it towards his lips hesitantly and sniffed it delicately. It must have passed the test because he proceeded to take a small sip. He changed his technique and treated the tumbler like a shot, killing it off in one go like a boss. He closed his eyes momentarily and smiled. Putting the glass back down on the bar, he pointed at it like his finger was a gun and said, encore. If I had been worried about the cleanliness of the glass, the sheer amount of alcohol that it contained must have reassured him that it would at least kill any lingering germs. As we chatted, the ritual repeated a few more times. During the conversation, he dropped a Jackson down with every round. Drinks at Jimmy's rarely cost even a sawbuck, so if I could keep my angel until closing, I could pay not only last month's rent, but also this month and possibly next month's as well. After we were 5 rounds in, he slowed down a bit, but started buying a drink for me for every 3 he downed. Each time he bought a round, he dropped a 50 and told me to keep the change. By 11 o'clock, I was set with this month's rent and was even working on next month. By the witching hour, or as I call it, my sister's hour, vanity o'clock, he was becoming very flirty. As he paid for his drinks, he gave the back of my hand a gentle caress with the tip of his finger. I had to admit that I was starting to get interested in more than just his impressive roll of cash. His touch was electric, setting off a shiver that raced through my entire body. Between each touch, his fingers seemed to seek constant contact with my skin. I hoped that he was into me and not just seeing me through vodnoculars that he surely must have had on by now. Binoculars are like beer goggles, only with a much higher magnification. As the flirting climbed to a new level, we began exchanging life stories. You know the kind. The guy feels compelled to demonstrate his athletic prowess by showing how tight his muscles still are. Somehow, that expensive black silk shirt managed to become unbuttoned halfway, exposing the white cotton t-shirt he wore tighter than the manufacturer could have probably ever imagined. I asked him about himself, and he said that he'd been a model when he was younger. He still ran triathlons, he was some kind of agent, and then blah, 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 and now blah, blah, blah. Oh my goodness. Don't you hate it when all someone talks about is themselves? I told him that I'd been bartending since high school, when one of us, probably me, brought up how I started working as a bartender. In my junior year, I had a boyfriend named Snake. Snake owned a bar outside of Brick City, so I worked there on Friday nights, weekends, and some holidays. But he was a Satanist with lousy breath, so it didn't work out. Then I dated his brother, Newt. By a particular comparison, even though Newt was Snake's little brother, you probably could have called him his big brother, if you know what I mean. But that didn't work out either. Then I met Thumper. Let me tell you, that was a crazy week. So you only knew Thumper for a week, he said. No way, I said, with a demure giggle that came out too fast, sounding more like a snort. I only hung out with him for like 2 days. That was the week I met Snake and started working at his bar. He seemed hesitant, and then he asked, "So you slept with..." He paused for a moment, trying to remember any of the names or their proper order, saying, "Snake, Newt, then Thumper, in the same week?" I nearly snorted again, saying, "No way. What do you think I am? And besides, I thought I was a lesbian that week, so I didn't sleep with any of them. We just dated." As I polished a glass, his look suggested that he wanted to hear more about my journey to mixology, but I noticed a look of mild confusion on his face. The conversation seemed to stall for a bit, but it rebounded when he ordered another round. After he wiped off the stool next to him, he gestured for me to join him with the bottle of Angel's Envy on the customer side. The flirting continued until closing without interruption. He was helpful, if a bit handsy, while I was cleaning up. Half of the bottle of Angel's Envy was gone, but my rent was paid, not to mention a little something extra. The closer I was to being done, the more obvious it was that he might have had one too many drinks. By the time the stools were upside down on the bar, he needed my help to walk to the door. The whole way, his hands were grasping for purchase so he wouldn't fall. This is the oldest trick in the book for a customer to hit on a bar girl. I always had a backhand slap ready for this maneuver. But the more he caressed my neck, back, and then my shoulders, the less I thought about delivering that slap. He was acting quite fresh and gave no signs of letting up. Even with his fumbling, I managed to clean up the bar, and as soon as we made it to the door, I locked up and then helped him up the 3 steps to the street. The chill of 2:15 a.m. hit like a slap across the face. I sobered up, standing on the cold, deserted street, holding him up as his hands wandered. A cold breeze raised goosebumps under my black stockings. He was speaking softly, but I couldn't understand his subdued mutterings. His feet seemed to be slipping as he guided me away from the streetlights of Dahmer Avenue towards the shadowy alleys of Gacy Way. Pulling me with both hands, we moved down the block slowly. I saw a car turn the corner and start creeping down the block, blinding me with the high beams. Mr. Armani straightened, clearly sobering up considerably. Before the pool of light created by the brights passed from my vision, another, even brighter set of lights engulfed us. The roof of the car was lit up like a nuclear burst. I could feel it in my head like a migraine or a 14-inch butcher knife in my brain. I heard the sound of an electric window rolling down over the strong purr of the big idling V8 engine. I heard a familiar voice say, "Hey, Penny, are you okay?" I wanted to say, "Turn off those damn lights." But putting on my best friendly smile, I said, "Who's that?" Then I recognized the voice and shouted, "Damn it, Crash, turn off those freaking lights before I make you pay your bar tab." A soft chuckle came from inside the car, and then the alley lights shut off abruptly. After the lights went dark, my vision finally started returning about 6 weeks later. The voice came again from inside of the car with a note of concern, asking, "Are you okay, Penny?" Next to me, I could feel my companion's hand firmly on my back as his body tightened like the coil of an overwound clock. "No, and with that, Mr. Armani seemed to crouch just a little as I said, "No, I am not okay. I still see spots." There was an audible sigh from the cruiser, and then the soft chuckle came again. My vision returned slowly, and I could clearly see the shield on the side of the Dark Bend police cruiser. "Yes," came out in a huff. "I'm fine. What are you doing tonight, seeing how many people you can blind?" He laughed. "No, you know we're always looking out for you." He leaned into the light, seeming to look straight at my companion, repeating the word always with a hint of menace. His strong jaw and piercing eyes were unnaturally vivid in the bright interior light of the black and white. He reached up to adjust the rearview mirror, his enormous bicep rippling menacingly through the shirt of his perfectly tailored uniform. Laughing, I said, "Yay, push off, Flatfoot." "Flatfoot," he repeated in a wounded tone. "I got my cruiser back." The light went off, and the amused chuckle could be heard again as the car pulled off. As the window closed with an electric whir, I said, "We all know crash number 4 is just around the corner." His laughter was muffled by the passing vehicle. I looked at my companion and said, "Let's get you a taxi." His demeanor warmed slowly, but now his hand felt cold on my back. I must have really sobered up because he was considerably less attractive to me now. "No, I'm okay," he said. "I think I will be fine to drive by the time my car warms up." "So where is your car?" I asked, looking around. In response, he pointed a long, slender finger towards a large black sedan that was parked on the corner and said, "I'm parked right there." I was happy to see that Crash had been true to his word. The old shit-brown Buick that had been abandoned for weeks, taking up prime parking near the bar, was finally gone. Free shots for Crash when he comes in next time, I mused. "Can I give you a ride somewhere?" he asked. I was about to say no when I felt his hand on my back again and thought, "What the hell?" I said, "Sure, why not? I only live a few blocks from here." Out of nowhere, a large black alley cat with a strange marking above his eyes suddenly came out of nowhere and blocked my path. He looked up, meowing at me, as if asking, "What in the hell are you doing?" Looking back at Mr. Armani, he began to look far less appealing. Questioning my decision, I considered the wisdom of my feline friend. His hand running up my back felt really good, so I threw caution to the wind. He tried to give the cat a kick, but it dodged the attack skillfully, growling as it retreated into the shadows. As we climbed into his car, I noted that the interior was a deep, soft leather. It was cold, and my discomfort grew, as though I could feel the springs through all that thick leather. His soft caress came again, bringing me back to my current surroundings. I didn't complain. Hot guy and a nice car. I could definitely throw that in my sister's perfect face the next time I saw her. I made a mental note to leave out how the seat felt like a couch from the Good Samaritan's thrift store. In the distance, I could hear the sound of the cat's loud and lonely cries. The sound was distant but clear, filled with echoes of sorrow. We sat there talking for a bit, more chit-chat about nothing in particular. The whole time, he kept running his hands over my body, caressing my shoulders and sliding lower down my spine. I felt drawn towards him as the cold seeping into my bones began to bother me less. I instinctively knew something was wrong, but I just couldn't figure it out. I realized that if he didn't start the car, it would never warm up. A soft blue glow slowly filled the car. No, scratch that. A soft blue glow slowly filled up the car's interior, but without a source that I could readily see. Was the vehicle even running? I couldn't remember a thing. The car was still off. He hadn't even put the keys in the ignition. As he leaned in for a kiss, I turned my head away from him. I exclaimed, "Come on, start the car. Ending up as a pennysicle or a couple of frozen stiffs is not my idea of a good time." But before I could say the words, he grabbed my hair firmly at the base of my neck and pulled my head down violently. Honestly, if I'd known him better, I might have enjoyed that. But he was moving way too fast. I managed to push him off a little to get away from him as the glow from the pendant became stronger. The bright light made me feel warmer, although it clearly made him increasingly uncomfortable. I felt considerably soberer now, but far less at ease being alone with him. Intending to extricate myself from the situation, I looked right at him. However, my thoughts and actions, not to mention my will, were all lost in a moment of absolute terror. Looking into his eyes, my stomach churned with revulsion as they dilated to inky black pools. I saw myself reflected in the cold onyx mirror of his eyes. Behind that was a void so deep that I could feel myself falling into it. I could see how long his incisors were. Or had they always been like that? I knew they couldn't have been, but now I didn't know what I knew. The blue light intensified, and he recoiled from the radiance of the eldritch glow. I could see that the glimmer was coming from the beautiful pendant necklace that my sister had given me, or perhaps left at my house. Or had she left it on her dresser when I crashed at her place? Who can remember at a time like this? Damn it, Penny. Maybe you should quit selling your Adderall. This is a hell of a time to get distracted. That detail wasn't critical, as the thing that had been Mr. Armani, cowering in the corner with my hair in a death grip, showing no signs of letting go. Let's put a verb in there. The glow seemed to cast strange shadows outside in the darkness surrounding the vehicle. Swirling and incoherent shapes seemed to both advance and retreat at the same time. He struggled against whatever power the blue light held, fighting the pain as he came closer to me. Blue was definitely not his color. Do you know how some people look horrendous under fluorescent lights? The intensifying luminescence that had that effect on him to a terrifying degree. Only moments before, he had been nearly angelic, but now he looked horrific in that soft blue glow. His breath was as cold as it was foul, the odor laced with a strong putrescence. As I struggled to push him away, I heard the sound of smashing glass. He lunged towards me, a mouth full of black razors, when something suddenly wrenched his head violently out the window. He made an urgent and mournful sound that reached deep into my stomach and twisted it into knots. The echoes reverberated in the confined space of the car, rejoining his endless scream. Together, they formed a piercing cacophony of pain. The noise deafened my ears, making me a victim to the repeating percussions in my head. My vision went red, rendered brighter by the blue light from my necklace, which had begun to fade. I wiped the blood from my eyes with shaking hands and looked at his trembling form. His eyes were black mirrors. His teeth were long white fangs tinged with blood. Long black fingernails that appeared as dark as raw iron clutched at his throat. His head was pulled back unnaturally and was gruesome to behold. A black and gaping slice existed where his neck had been. There was a glint of metal as the sharp blade pierced the top of his skull and twisted with a gut-wrenching, crackling sound. His scream faded in my ears, replaced by a loud gurgling that died out as the life ran out of his body. His death throes subsided as the body stopped grasping for the throat that was no longer there. The world grew silent as the body became still. Time stopped as I took in the scene before me. I stared at the hideous creature that had been my drinking companion's true form, suddenly transformed from a gorgeous man into something out of a nightmare. As my thoughts raced, my body was frozen in place. After the wicked blade was pulled from the skull, the lifeless head slumped back through the window. The movement outside the car might as well have been from another universe. From the scant light, a shadowy figure emerged from that other universe and into my world. It was but one shadow among many as it moved slowly, along the side of the car. My brain screamed for my body to move, but it didn't respond. The shadow floated across the rear window in a surreal parody of reality. Oh my goddess, I thought. I need to stop criticizing the stupid shit that people do in horror movies. Waiting for the killer to come murder you like a dumbass seriously takes first prize for the lamest way to die. The shadowy form, no longer visible through the dirty black window, moved out of sight. The darkness stilled, swirling languidly in shapeless chaos. The world grew more detached from any connection to reality. The dimension I occupied drifted slowly and steadily away from anywhere I could recognize. I felt as if my heart would burst from my chest as my pulse raced from the thunder echoing in my ears. My body ignored my mind's frantic call to action. My vision faded, and my eyes stung as the black blood dripped into them. In my mind, I could not stop seeing the horrible visage of the creature that had nearly killed me, or something far worse. Still frozen in terror, I couldn't even wipe the blood from my eyes. With each breath, a metallic taste in my mouth grew more potent. Still deaf from the scream mere seconds, moments, or even centuries ago, I prepared myself for whatever happened next. The last of the blue glow faded, leaving me in total darkness. The weight of the shadows grew heavier as I anticipated my imminent demise. Just then, I jumped as my cell phone shattered the stillness with the ironic ringtone. Don't you wish your girlfriend was hot like me? Came in at 26 minutes.